Welcome back, folks. We've got the privilege and the pleasure of visiting today with our representative in the House of Representatives, Dr. Paul Gosar. And as you know, he's our endorsed candidate. He's Mr. Conservative. And we want to talk today about an issue that he was first to the fore on, and that's Fast and Furious. So now, Paul, what's going on with the Attorney General, with the documents, with the availability of average citizens to understand exactly what is at stake here with the Fast and Furious investigation?
Thank you, Terry. Well, Congress is set up as supposed to be three equal branches, and Congress is supposed to have the ability to have oversight of the judiciary and the executive branches. What has come about with this Fast and Furious is that there's now over 140,000 documents in which we've been able to see maybe 1,000 or so, most of them duplicative and heavily redacted, which means they've been blacked out. We've asked for that, plus also being able to talk with witnesses. The Attorney General has not allowed us to do that. We have asked for it repeatedly, and we finally, last October, filed a subpoena to make sure that he complied to give us that documentation. He has refused. And so what we did is we moved forward with contempt charges that said that a government official cannot thwart Congress's ability to have oversight, to understand. We want the documentation. We even skinnied it down in this contempt charge just from February 4th to current. And the reason we skinnied that down is that on February 4th of 2011, a letter was given to Senator Grassley saying that this DOJ, nobody in Washington was associated with any gun running. That was retracted because we actually have an email that shows that Lanny Brewer, the head of criminal division, number 3 at the DOJ, was in Mexico City that very same day proposing a gun running scheme in Mexico City. He's lying. He's been caught lying. We want to have the documentation to find out who actually allowed these guns to walk, and what walking is allowing somebody who's not supposed to be able to buy a gun to be allowed to have a gun. And then not to interdict them, to take them with surveillance if you're doing a gun running procedure, not having surveillance and tracking, and then interdicting them once they're in the hands of somebody who shouldn't have them. This is outright horrible. And in this case, Brian Terry, the Border Patrol agent, lost his life to one of these guns. There's also 300 Mexican people who have also lost their lives on the Mexican side of the border. We want to find out who authorized this. We know it came from Washington, D.C. It did not come from final oversight of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona, and we want to make sure that we put checks and balances in so this doesn't happen again. Hold those accountable to the proper letter of the law, regardless if they're the Attorney General, whether they're the U.S. Attorney, or anybody who allowed this to happen, because we cannot allow the government to infringe upon us.
At the heart of this issue is a strategy that said, much in the same way that drug enforcement occurs, where we're going to catch a low-level person and we're going to trace the money up. The heart of this strategy is an old law enforcement strategy, but the practice actually went horribly wrong because literally hundreds and hundreds of guns without the markers, without the RFID chips in them, without a way to track them, they crossed the border. The straw buyers bought them, took them across the border, and then later, when they were found at crime scenes, we saw that yes, they had in fact been owned by the drug carriers, and they'd killed hundreds of Mexican citizens and border agent Brian Terry. But where did it go wrong? And this is really one of the biggest questions I think the public has. Where did it go wrong within the law enforcement end that someone in law enforcement thought it was a good idea to give these vicious drug cartels weapons? How did that, do we have any idea how that thinking came about?
Well, we've got an idea, Terry. In 2007, or in the Bush administration, the end of the Bush administration, there was a program that the country of Mexico and the United States worked on, a program called Operation Wide Receiver. And the reason I bring it up, because you hear the administration say that they are the ones who started it. What they did is they walked a little over 400 guns, or not walked, but actually did gun running with surveillance and tracking from both sides. It was watched from both sides, making sure that they were interdicting as law enforcement. In that case of a little over 400 guns, over 200 of them were lost. That program ended in 2007. Now let's fast forward to 2009, where the Office of Criminal, if I'm not mistaken, the Deputy Attorney General Lanny Brewer sent somebody to reopen the case into Arizona in 2009. And all of a sudden you start seeing this whole thing start to elaborate. In this case, what's so egregious is that ATF allowed sales to happen are federal firearms licensees, as they were reported if they could buy the guns first and foremost, but also if they were uncomfortable and saw funny circumstances, kept reporting them, saying, listen, I feel very uncomfortable. This person's already bought 2 guns. I don't want to do this. ATF was telling them to sell the guns. So the hard part here was ATF allows you to have a federal firearms license, but then they're also telling you that you got to sell the guns to these individuals, and we knew it was a problem. The thing I also want to stress, Terry, is the federal firearms licensees did their job immaculately, absolutely immaculately. So it goes further wrong when there is no tracking mechanism. So even the federal firearms licensees actually highlighted the special agents for surveillance. They contacted their superiors who told them to stand down. So they couldn't even track these with proper surveillance. The Mexican government kept seeing these guns showing up in the crime scene, so they thought they had a cartel arming for war, actually citing that as a quote in one of their highlights. When they approached the federal licensees registry on these guns, they were turned away. They were not given proper circumstances from our DOJ. We want to find out what happened here. Who allowed this to happen? We even have retaliatory aspects against the whistleblowers. Here's the guys that were uncomfortable. They came forward because this was wrong, and this is wrong. We should not allow guns to be put in the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
With this scandal, at the core of this scandal is a central question about the Attorney General of the United States. Was he involved for political purposes in an attempt to get a new assault weapons ban or some other restriction on the Second Amendment by trumping up an example of, the people who sell guns in America are responsible. All these guns went to Mexico. We can show that they came from America. Is this one of the possible reasons that they have decided to clamp up, that they've exerted executive privilege and kept all the documents away from you folks? Because that's sure from the outside, my friends who are in favor of the Second Amendment feel that this is just the assault weapons ban part 2, that this was the lead up to a new ban on weapons.
Well, Dennis Burke was part of that assault bans legislation in the 90s. So he was a principal orchestrator on the Hill in regards to that. But when you look at this, you even go back to Eric Holder and his comments as a U.S. attorney, that we need to brainwash Americans into new gun laws. Whoa, here we go. And not giving us the information. We have an inspector general, Terry, that has reviewed these. And you would expect somebody to have the highest credentials. They've already contaminated one of our witnesses by allowing them to see information they shouldn't have seen. That's basic legal precedent, right. Okay? We know that Gary Grindler, the chief of staff for Attorney General Eric Holder, had information that we got documents on as of April of 2010. So did Lanny Brewer, so did Jason Weinstein, so did Kenneth Blanco. All these things are there. We have that. So we know someone knew, and they knew about the intricate movement of these 1,500 guns as out of that time. And he said he didn't read the memo? Give me a break.
Hard to believe. If U.S. citizens want to find out exactly what's going on, you can't tell them, but it's in the congressional record. Did I hear that right? Absolutely.
One of the things that happened is that there were 5 affidavits for wiretaps that were placed. Chairman Issa was able to get those through a mole within the DOJ. They were made part of the congressional record. And so if anybody wants to read those affidavits for the wiretaps, they can go to the congressional record to read those.
But you're not allowed to discuss them.
I've read them already, so I can't discuss those. But what I tell people is you need to read and learn and find out exactly why we're standing on our contempt charges.
So when the news says that this is purely political and it's an attack on Holder because of his race, the answer is go to the congressional record, read the wiretap requests, and you'll know for a fact that's not true.
As I've said over and over again, is Arizona, the last time I knew, was multiracial, where Hispanic Americans, where Native Americans, were from all walks of life. Tell me how that bullet affected Brian Terry. How did it affect those 300 Mexican people? So his race card is different? I disagree. We've got a problem with this administration on Arizona. I don't know what it is, but you know what? When you start a war with Arizona, we'll finish it.
Absolutely. Dr. Gosar, thank you for being with us today. It's a pleasure to visit with you folks. When you get ready to vote this fall, here's the gentleman you want to be voting for. God bless you. God bless the USA.